Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this July 13, 2015 Monday night edition of Nightcast. Well, our opening story tonight, finally in Greece, Eurozone leaders have agreed to offer Greece a third bailout after marathon talks in Brussels.
It was a long, long night, billed as the last chance for a deal on Greece. EU hacks are used to last-minute, late-night deals, not ones stretching through till breakfast time. Talks nearly collapsed altogether. Eurozone leaders were on a knife edge. Don't be fooled by this smile. The Greek Prime Minister had very few friends here. Trust in his government is at an all-time low, following months of backtracking and insults. After 15 hours of arguments, he and the hardline German Chancellor reached an impasse. The two leaders threatened to walk out. Pulled back from the brink, a weary-looking Chancellor Merkel assured doubters this morning she is now on board with the Greece deal.
The situation is tense, so it's in everyone's interest to make the next steps work. If the Greek Parliament does its bit, trust can be regained.
But conditions imposed on Greeks are harsh. Their Prime Minister had promised an end to what he called creditor-imposed humiliation. He knows he'll struggle to sell this deal at home. The deal is difficult, he said, but we've avoided financial asphyxiation and the collapse of the financial system. We fought as hard as we could. So what next? To rebuild trust, the Greek Parliament is expected to pass VAT, tax and pension reforms this week. Eurozone finance ministers are working out an interim agreement to keep Greek banks afloat and debt repayments honoured. Worth an estimated €80 billion, the new bailout will be spread over 3 years, starting late summer, if all those involved can agree.
There are a lot of ifs involved here. This was no glorious victory for Greece or its Eurozone partners. Sure, they arrived bleary-eyed this morning with their "we did it" message, but don't forget, today's deal is about sitting down at a later date to hammer out those details. And as for reducing Greece's crippling debt, that has been put on the back burner again.
So today's agreement does not solve the Greek crisis in the long term. And serious rifts between Eurozone countries have been exposed, not just with Greece, but between EU powers Germany and a more conciliatory France. The French president said a compromise on Greece was necessary for EU unity.
Today was a long negotiation, but above all, a historic decision, because if Greece had left the Eurozone, what would have been said? That the Eurozone wasn't able to ensure its integrity and solidarity? The Eurozone would have gone backwards when it needs to go forwards.
What leaders wanted more than anything here was to restore trust in the wider Eurozone. And there a victory has been achieved. After months of speculation, talk of Greece falling out of the single currency has gone. For now. Katja Adler, BBC News, Brussels.
Okay, thank you, Katja Adler. That was a very good report, by the way, a very detailed report. And yet, friends, we have more. We have much more video tonight. As you heard, the Eurozone leaders have agreed to offer Greece a third bailout after the marathon talks that went on last night in Brussels. European Commission Chief Jean-Claude Juncker said the risk of Greece leaving the Eurozone had been averted, but there are no winners and no losers, he said. But what exactly has been agreed? You heard Katja Adler's explanations. Here now, Andy Verity from the BBC takes a look at the details.
Alexis Tsipras wasn't the one leading last night's marathon conversation, and it showed. He's been forced to accept terms including the involvement of the body he spent years attacking, the International Monetary Fund run by Christine Lagarde, seen here with Greek Finance Minister Euclid Tsakalotos. To stay in the euro, Greece has given up control of its own economic future. So what does Greece have to do? Well, it will have to enact laws by Wednesday imposing VAT on more goods and removing exemptions from it, for example, for remote islands. It will also need to take measures to cut pensions up front in a comprehensive reform of the pension system. If Greece misses its targets to get the budget into surplus, there'll be automatic spending cuts. It will also have to sell off assets, including the electricity network, ports and airports. And the money for those sales will go into a separate fund. Greece won't get to decide how it's spent. The first 25 billion euros will pay back the cost of recapitalising Greece's stricken banks.
The approximately 25 billion that will be needed for recapitalisation is repaid. The remaining funds coming from the fund will be used for 50% to bring down debt even more, and 50% can be invested in Greece by the Greek government.
What Greece is getting for that is a third bailout, enabling it to borrow up to 86 billion euros more. 10 billion euros would be released immediately to stop Greek banks running out of cash. There'd also be another 35 billion euros on top of that from existing European programmes to boost investment and job creation. And the deal says Europe will consider the possibility of debt relief, such as taking longer to pay back all the money it's already borrowed. Mr. Tsipras now has to convince the world and the Greek parliament he was right to accept terms much harsher than the austerity Greece rejected in a referendum 8 days ago. And his key demand, debt relief, remains just a maybe. Andy Verity, BBC News.
All right, thank you, Mr. Verity, Andy. And friends, we have more news tonight in other areas. I promised you we have more on Greece too. I promised you last night I'd bring you up to date on what we were hearing about the towering fires in Northern Ireland. We have that story that will be coming up. Also, fires that burned a lot of wooden boats in Dubai. We've got that story for you. And we have a story about the talks that went on through the night in Vienna regarding the Iran nuclear deal. We'll save that till later. Let's continue with more video we have from today on Greece. That's been the big deal for the past weeks, with this thing coming to a head finally last night, or early this morning actually. The French President Francois Hollande says the Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras made what he called, quote, a courageous choice in negotiations over a third Greek bailout. Greece will now have to pass reforms demanded by the Eurozone by Wednesday. The agreement includes a $35 billion growth package as well as a $50 billion, did I say dollars? I'm sorry, friends, I meant to say a 35 billion euro growth package as well as a 50 billion euro Greece-based fund that will privatize or manage Greek assets. You know, right now, the euro and the dollar are not exactly 1-to-1 in ratio, but close. So at this moment, when we say 35 billion euros, it's close to $35 billion in equivalency, and 50 billion euros is close. Not exact, there's going to be some difference, to $50 billion in United States dollars. But let's go now to the video with French President Francois Hollande.
Alexis Tsipras, the Greek Prime Minister, who asked its parliament to adopt a stance on reforms. So expectations were to be met, and he made a very courageous choice. He was asked for other reforms, yet other reforms, but at the same time he knew that this was the very condition to obtain this 80 billion financing, which will be made possible now for his country, with a view to finance his coming projects to meet the deadlines and maturities. 35 billion also were made possible out of the Juncker plan. This concerns investments, but also the shorter-term financing.
There's another big player in the all-night negotiations. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel says Eurozone leaders reached an agreement over Greece, which includes, as she put it, quote, essential changes. And again, the agreement includes a 50 billion euro. That'd be the equivalent of 36 billion pounds of Greece-based asset fund being set up, of which 25 billion euros would be used to recapitalize Greek banks. Now, the talks took place over 17 hours in Brussels, and as you've been hearing, continued overnight.
Beyond the measures agreed on in June, essential changes have to be made. For example, on a complete overhaul of the pension system, a reform of the product markets, on privatization and changes in the labor market. All of that, I think, is clear and has been clear and is stated very clearly also in the text. We then talked at some length about the program as such and the volume, 86 billion to 87 billion over 3 years. How can debt sustainability be achieved? And this can be created also through setting up a privatization fund to the tune of 50 billion euros.
All right, friends, we have one more video story on Greece to go before we go to news elsewhere around the world with some of the fires I was mentioning to you. While we've got Gavin Hewitt in this next video report covering how Greeks welcomed the news of an agreement that could keep the country in the Eurozone. Others feel despair. Some welcomed it. Others feel despair that they must endure austerity for many more years. Here's Gavin Hewitt with his report.
Petralana, an Athens neighborhood that supported Alexis Tsipras in his stand against austerity. They woke to a deal that kept Greece in the euro, but here there was more bewilderment than celebration.
The country cannot bear these reform measures. It's going to become even more poor. You can see for yourself. Watch around. It used to be better before.
Ilias had supported the radical left party Syriza, believing it would say no to further cuts.
I believed in Syriza. I voted for them. I think Syriza betrayed its friends and its ideas. It did a 180-degree turn.
Elsewhere in the capital, the mood was very different. Greece had secured its future in Europe.
We're happy because we think that this is going to bring stability to the country. We want to be in the euro, and now we are 100% sure that we are with the Europeans. And I feel much more secure at the moment and relieved.
But the deal is controversial. The government has to place assets worth up to 50 billion euros in a special fund to be privatized. It'll be managed by Greece, but supervised by outsiders. Even some cabinet ministers are struggling to accept this.
It was a forced agreement under tremendous political pressure and the imminent threat of sudden death of the real economy due to the closure of banks.
Did Greece surrender?
No, we survived.
The minister told me that the Europe of austerity had won. The Prime Minister, Alexis Tsipras, has arrived back in Athens. His next challenge is to get Parliament to agree to the new measures by Wednesday and so unlock negotiations towards a third bailout.
Almost certainly the raft of new measures, the tax increases, the pension reforms, will be approved by the Parliament. But the Prime Minister will have to rely on the support of other parties, raising questions as to whether in the long term these measures will be fully implemented.
at least we will have the potential for confidence to return. But this will take time. And of course, a lot will depend on the banking sector and how quickly banks will reopen.
Even though there is widespread relief that Greece is staying in the euro, many here say too much sovereignty has been surrendered. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Athens.
All right, friends, and before we go to the video about the fire of the tower of wooden structures, big towers, fire in North Ireland, I've got video showing a number of wooden trading ships that have gone up in flames along the Dubai Creek, a waterway in the heart of the city. It's not clear what started the blaze. One minor injury was reported. And friends, because some people are watching or listening to tonight's news on via podcast, I'm going to start that video that has captions with it, subtitles with it. I'm going to start that again from the beginning, and I'm going to read those because those who are listening to the podcast will not be able to see the subtitles, and I promised some time ago when we had subtitles and videos like this, I would do that for you. So let's start that one again for those of you listening via podcast. Fire engulfed several wooden trading ships moored in the heart of Dubai earlier today, on Monday. Firefighters rushed to tackle the blaze, which spread to nearby boxes and crates. Black smoke was seen rising from the scene, and one minor injury was reported. And that's all of the subtitles on that. You can still see some boats burning in the background in the video. Now, last night, friends, I told you about towering bonfires at Northern Ireland, where they were having celebrations that caused some controversy. Monday marks the high point of Northern Ireland's marching season. This year, it's delayed by a day because July 12 parades are not held on Sundays for religious reasons. But the celebrations have already began yesterday through the traditional lighting of huge bonfires. To some, they are an important expression of Protestant identity, but they are also controversial. Ireland correspondent Andy Martin has this video report.
On wastelands and green space across Northern Ireland, some teenagers see it as their job and their right to build bonies, bonfires, towering structures in celebration of a public holiday which is largely the preserve of Protestants. Up and up and up they go before going up in smoke. In some parts of Belfast, windows have to be boarded up, such is the ferocity and proximity of the fire. Some who live close by find them intimidating, so much so that they don't want to appear on camera.
I'm feeling quite angry about it. I feel it's unfair to put people's lives and houses at risk and people's property. Windows were popping last year and it wasn't even half that size, so I don't know what's going to happen, and it's quite scary.
The fires have been stacked in questionable places for decades, so those who build and attend their burning can't understand why there is now resistance to what they see as an expression of their Protestant identity.
Part of growing up, used to it. I'll be there with the rest of them.
We're used to it. It's everyday life. It's our culture.
The bonfires are normally lit before the biggest marching day of the season, which marks the victory of William of Orange, a Protestant, over Catholic King James over 300 years ago.
The folk memory of them would certainly take us back to 1690, to the Battle of the Boyne and the aftermath of the Boyne, when we understand that bonfires were lit to celebrate William's victory at the Boyne.
Is they all going to light eventually?
They are closely protected. Both Republican youths and rival bonfire builders have been known to ignite the more spectacular structures ahead of the 11th night. Anything remotely Republican or Irish is collected for the occasion and set alight. As darkness falls, the smell of burning floats across towns and cities, and flames lick the night sky. To some, they're an integral part of what it is to be a Northern Ireland Protestant. To others, a menace, a political statement on which effigies of enemies bubble and char before turning to ash. Andy Martin, BBC News, Belfast.
Friends, in this next story relates to migration. Perhaps the United States government might want to take note of what Hungary is doing and the wisdom that they are using. And, you know, friends, any people who live in and receive the benefits of the great country of the United States really should be giving thanks to God, who was fulfilling a promise he made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph. The descendants of Jacob, Joseph, were one of the descendants, Manasseh. Because the blessings, the great blessings of this country, is the result of God keeping a promise to Joseph's father, Jacob, on behalf of Manasseh. And those who are privileged to be here, if you appreciate it, the appreciation and the thanks should really go to the great God in keeping his promise to give the blessing he's given to the descendants of directly Manasseh, the modern day people who are Manasseh. And Manasseh should be wise and seeking its God and obeying its God, and knowing how to protect its borders, which one country certainly is doing. Hungary has begun building a fence along its border with Serbia, which it hopes will stem the flow of people arriving from war zones or simply in search of a better life. The government says it cannot cope with the influx of people entering the country on a daily basis. In this report with Nick Thorpe from Budapest, you'll see what the country is doing.
The Hungarian army in action on the Serbian border, building what the Fidesz government calls a temporary barrier to keep out illegal migrants. First, the trees will be felled and a road built 175 kilometres long. Then the fence, razor wire 4 metres high, 1.5 metres thick, will be rolled out. And this is what it's designed to stop. Since the beginning of this year, nearly 80,000 asylum seekers just walked into Hungary through the open fields. Many come from war zones: Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan and Congo. Others just come to Europe in search of a better life.
It's an unmaintainable situation from our perspective. So what we have decided that we have to establish a physical obstacle on the border of ours between Serbia and Hungary to stop the flow.
The influx of refugees is increasing tensions inside Hungary. This rally in Budapest targeted migrants at a major railway station trying to board trains bound for Western Europe. They're chanting "White Hungary," a cruder version of the government's message, "Go somewhere else, Hungary is for Hungarians." But inside the station, volunteers help the refugees. Civic groups across the country have mobilised to provide food, advice and medical care. Some asylum seekers have been travelling for months. Nick Thorpe, BBC News, Budapest.
All right, friends, I mentioned earlier how we would cover what happened in Vienna with the talks that were going there yesterday and through the night and today. According to the U.S., progress has been made despite holdups. The caption with this first photograph, and I'm wondering what happened to the photograph. It's just showing a big blue screen like that. The caption with what's supposed to be here as a photograph to open the story reads, "Diplomats say that hopes for a deal oscillated throughout the day today. Talks in Vienna aimed at reaching a deal on Iran's nuclear program have made progress, but some issues remain unresolved," the White House has said. 6 world powers. Now, they're talking about the P5 plus 1. That plus 1 is Germany, the country who signed an unconditional surrender at the end of World War II and cannot be a part of the UN's Security Council. So the P5, the Security Council, which includes the U.S., Russia, the UK, China, and who am I leaving out there? And France. They've been negotiating, and Germany with them in this arrangement, in this situation, and so the P5 plus 1, that's 6, and they're negotiating with Iran about scaling down Iran's nuclear activities. What they hope, as many of you know if you've been keeping up with these talks, is that Iran would agree to do so imminently in return for lifting of some of the economic sanctions. The latest deal deadline was tonight, Monday night, and it passed with no announcement. But Iran's Students News Agency, ISNA, reported early on Tuesday morning their time. You know, they're ahead of us, so it's already Tuesday there. They just reported that Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif and EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini would read a joint statement in Vienna in a few hours. Meanwhile, another Iranian news agency, the semi-official Fars, said Iran would meet the 6 countries' representatives at 0800 Greenwich Mean Time on Tuesday. And that's just about 3 hours away from right now, for a comprehensive meeting. There were, did I tell you that right? Just a moment. Let me refigure that. Yeah, roughly about 3 hours. No, wait, that'd be more like about 6 hours from now. There were contrasting assessments about the possibility of an agreement as hopes of a breakthrough rose and then receded throughout the day today. And then, let me see if this photograph's going to come through. Yeah, the caption with this photograph or this one actually reads, Mohammad Javad Zarif spoke to reporters while taking a break from negotiations. Diplomats familiar with the talks told the Associated Press news agency that an announcement of a deal could be approaching because of the need of top officials involved in the negotiations to leave Australia's capital on Tuesday morning. However, the White House cautioned that significant issues remained unresolved and that Iran still had some tough decisions to make, even though genuine progress, quote unquote, had been made, and the U.S. negotiating team was prepared to stay in Austria. And I meant to say Austria earlier, not Australia. They're prepared to stay in Austria. You know, they're doing the meetings in Vienna, which is in Austria, as long as there was a chance of success in the talks. They're not going to sign an agreement until all of our concerns have been addressed, and as long as they continue to make progress in doing that, then the talks will continue, White House spokesman Josh Earnest said. And he repeated will twice, saying they will continue. Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif said that while a breakthrough was imminent, there would be no deal before Tuesday. The so-called PS 5+1, again the P5 is the U.S., the UK, France, China, and Russia, The +1 is Germany. And it's separated like that because, again, the P5 are the 5 security members of the UN, and Germany is not part of that security. But all 6 want Iran to scale back its sensitive nuclear activities to ensure that it cannot build a nuclear weapon. You know, we've gone over how many times the former Secretary of State, George Shultz, pointed out they're like rug salesmen. Iran cannot be trusted. Even their own people tell you, you can't trust us. We'll tell you one thing and we'll stab you in the back. Iran, which wants crippling international sanctions lifted, has always insisted, at least in these public talks here, that its nuclear work is peaceful. I do have some video. Friends, let's see which way we go for that video. The BBC's James Robbins in Vienna says the clocks are running exceedingly slowly in the negotiations. All the key ministers seem close to exhaustion, sending out conflicting signals on the timing of an agreement, the BBC correspondent adds. Now, the caption with this video I play says, Iran has the world's 4th largest crude oil reserves, 150 billion barrels, and this has subtitles. For those of you watching on or listening on podcast, I'm going to read those subtitles to you as we roll this video related to this story. Okay, I got to back it up, and I think it's on this one. All right, somehow we've lost that video. What has happened here? Maybe I just got it out of order. Let's try. Friends, somehow we lost that video. I'll try to get that for you tomorrow night. It shows, it gives a lot of interesting detail about how Iran produces a 4th huge, 150 billion barrels of crude oil reserves, being the world's 4th largest crude oil reserve producer. I do have a little more on this story, though. If Iran reached a deal, triumph of diplomacy means we all will have won when we all could have lost. Now, I'm quoting Iran, which said, plain and simple, no spin needed. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, meanwhile, stressed that no deal should be expected to be perfect. All right, friends, and that's all we have on that. And let me just scan ahead here. I've got some notes on some things happening. And I tell you what, I'm going to save that story until tomorrow night. Nothing urgent on that one. Let me just bear with me just a moment. I'm scanning some things that are coming across right now just to know. Nope. No need to put that on tonight. All right, I don't have video anyway, and I'm not going to waste time telling you about it. Thanks for joining me, friends, for this Monday night report. That's it for tonight. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying good night. So long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.